Another question is
Sure.
how to watch a fight and what you're looking for in the fight, as well as based off of what you see in the fight, how that affects your upcoming decision making, whether you're rolling, leveling, trying to identify weak spots, and how to improve your board to support the way you want to win with whatever team you put together. Can you talk more about what specifically you're looking for in a fight?
Yeah, so how I think the best way to approach this is that you actually don't necessarily want to be watching a fight and then saying like, okay, well, now that I saw that fight went that way, I'm going to do this thing now. It's more so that you want to be able to look at your potential fights and make that decision preemptively, right? Because you don't want to be reactive. You want to be proactive in that situation. You want to say, okay, well, proactively reactive, maybe. You want to proactively say like, okay, their board looks like that and that and that. So that means I probably want to play towards that game, right? Whereas something like saying, okay, well, they built a Rage Blade, they want to ramp. So I know that I need to get like armored pen this. Not that you don't ever want armored pen. This is a very easy example. Like you need to make sure you can break through like a big front line in that game because you know they're going to build a big front line because they're trying to ramp, right? Stuff like that. I think what you're asking about more so is what to look at in any given fight to kind of like get a better understanding of how that fight will go and how the fights play out and how to like glean information from that fight for the next time you play it, right? For like the next. You can say like, okay, well, they have Ash with Rage Blade. I didn't know how good Ash with Rage Blade was going in. Now I want to know how good that is. And so a lot of that is you want to look at where the value is. I think this is something that Ramkiv told me like ages ago at this point. This is a great way to describe it, is that you always want to look at where the value is on your board. And the value is almost always going to first and foremost be where your items are and where your synergies kind of like, intersect. So on an Ash board, for example, right? Maybe you're playing 4 sniper, 4 ward. Maybe you're playing like 4 sniper, 4 porcelain. Maybe you're playing 2 porcelain, 2 sniper in some front line, whatever, right? And so in a situation like, it can be pretty easy if you're playing like 4 sniper, 4 porcelain. You probably want to look at the unit that has 4 porcelain, it is a porcelain sniper, because that's probably where like a lot of your value is going to be intersecting. And then more than likely that's where you're going to be putting your items as well, right? So just generally speaking, where you want to watch during a fight is you want to watch where your items are, because that's how you're going to be able to see what units are doing things. And then that's generally going to be where the units that are carrying your fights are. This is actually a great thing to touch on as well for anyone who might not be aware of, because I know you like to post these as well. For anyone who might not be aware, it's very important to keep your items on the same units, because if you have one item on every single person, and you're like, okay, well, where's my value? And then you see that your 4 frontliners and your 4 backliners all have like one item on them, or like half an item on them. It's hard to find where the value is because you're not getting any value. So generally speaking, it's like really important.
Or some cyber.
Yeah, for sure. But even then, you still want like 3 items on one unit, ideally, right? You want like to have little things to spread, but also be getting that big value. So if you can't find where the value is on your board, it means you're not getting enough value. And it should be relatively easy to say, okay, well, I want to look at where my 3 frontline items are, where my 3 backline items are, where my support items are. And then you just want to like watch those pieces during the fight. I think I almost always just innately go to my carry and the enemy carry and just see how fast they DPS first and foremost. That's where I find the most uses. Often is going to be like their carry hitting your itemized frontliner and your carry hitting their itemized frontliner. And if you can just like see the DPS races, you can get a good idea of how that fight will go next time, but also how good they are like relative to each other and how good the items are. Obviously, it takes more than one.
So you're looking at the damage bar on the right-hand side?
No, I'm just watching their HP bars. Like they straight up just watching the HP bars on the board. Yeah. So I'll see like when they're casting. So what it is, right? So if it's like there's their backline, there's my backline, my front line's here, my front line's here. I'll be watching the line from their backliner to their key backliner to my frontliner, and then my front backliner to like their key frontliner. And so like you just watch as like one line, right? You can see, and if they're like across from each other or whatever, that's it too. But generally speaking, that's where you're going to find the most value. And when it's not front to back fights, it's like, how well does their Lee Sin drain tank your Ash? And that's pretty easy, because then their frontliners becomes their carry in that situation. And so you just watch 2 units instead of like 4 units. But generally speaking, it's not too hard to watch where the value is, especially the better you get, the more people will just have all their items on a single unit, generally speaking. And it'll be pretty easy to just say like, okay, well, I'm going to watch these key points of value in the fight because that's where I will get my information. And again, it's not going to be that you watch one Ash fight and you're like, okay, I now understand everything about Ash itemization. It's going to be like, you see one Ash fight here with like a Rage Blade and a Death Blade, and you see another Ash fight, maybe a game or 2 later, where they have like Last Whisper red buff or something. And you get to compare those because you had an idea of how that first fight went, and you get to compare that to how the second fight went. You get to see how the items differ, how the front lines differ potentially. And the more you do that, the more you just watch those fights, and you get like, 'cause eventually, you see enough Ash players where you will. I mean, you could also just go to Meta TFT, look up the Explorer, and watch every Ash game known to man on in Twitch's VOD library for sure. And then that'll give you a very, very clean idea of it as well, if you really wanted to get nitty gritty with it. But naturally, just over the course of your general TFT playing, if you make a really big effort to just watch your fights and watch what the value is in your fights, you will have a very good understanding by the by the time you see Ash play a game, play a fight, you'll have a pretty good understanding of what makes Ash tick. Because you're watching like the key parts. You don't care what the Aphelios one with like no items, like the Senna 2 with 2 items or whatever is doing in those situations, because it's never gonna be like super representative of what that unit's capable of anyways, if you're just watching like them be a shitter synergy bot on a board that is not dedicated to them. So again, first and foremost, find what the board is dedicated to, find how the board functions, where the value is, and then focus on that in the fight, and that'll be how you see what they want, and then apply that later on.
Right. So like, I mean, usually for front to back, it's just who out-KKS or who outscale the other person, and you just kind of
CC can kind of be a big one too. So I guess that's like the one thing with like non-itemized units is that it's important to be able to tell which non-itemized units will get their CC off. So like, will not 2 get his CC off? Will like, I'm trying to think about their CC units. Not 2 is the only one I can think of because I got Nautilus ulted like 6 times today. Set, yeah. Udyr, right? Like, will those things get their CC off and where are the most impactful? Those are certainly little key spots as well to peek at, but in general, they won't be. And actually, you'll probably notice too that like those are probably the spots you itemize next, generally speaking, right? You give like a protectors to your Nautilus, you give like a protectors to your Udyr, or like a Warmogs to your Udyr or your set or whatever, because you want them to do more as well. So those would generally be your next pieces of value, because it's all about stacking value on value. So if a unit is already naturally very valuable with no items, it can be pretty valuable to just put an item on them and increase that. Not in every case, but generally speaking, I like to itemize my Udyr 1 before itemizing my Wukong 1. Because unless I'm planning to get Wukong 2 and need a secondary carry, right? It'll just do more because it CCs, and that's more impact to a fight, generally speaking, than I guess Wukong only bonks like 1 unit, but it's not quite the same.
Yeah. How about non-front to back? So let's say Lilia, Morgana, Sage, like what are you trying to pay attention there? Is it like kind of mainly where they ult and like how their damage spreads? Like where's your eye focus in that kind of battle? Let's say it's like an Ashe versus like a Morgana Lilia battle.
Yeah, so I think generally speaking, what I like to look at is just where the damage is, and it's like almost easier than the front to back, like Ashe versus Ashe thing, right? Because where the damage is, you can just follow the spell. I think following Morg spell with your eye and just seeing how much damage, if it actually kills the backliner, because like if your Morg is constantly, if you have like Gunblade, Rabadon's Shojin Morg, and she's leaving everything in the back line on 1 HP, and they're healing up or something, and you're like, okay, well maybe this isn't the build for Morgana, or maybe you need a Morellos over that Gunblade or something. Like things like that are very important. I think generally if you just follow where the damage goes, you want to like follow where the impact of your value unit is. Where the DPS unit is very easy because you just follow with Ashe. Ashe or like Kaisa, it's very easy because you literally just look at where they're attacking. With Morgan, Lilia gets like a little bit harder because you have to follow the projectile. But like Lilia too, right? I think you almost always, I focus more on like the first thing she hits because that's kind of the more consistent part of her ult. But certainly, I'll look at like how much damage the ball is doing in other situations, and like you can tell pretty quickly that like Lilia is somewhat positioning dependent, and positioning can in fact impact her DPS a lot the more you watch Lilia fights. And then you see where it goes, how much damage it does. I think that the same thing applies to, and it's like just as important to watch their value pieces as it is to watch yours. So like as much as you want to see like your Nautilus and your Lilia do things on your Lilia board, see if your Nautilus ults twice, whatever. It's all equally important to like watch their Ashe DPS and see how much damage it gets off and what you need to win that fight in the future, / like just what makes their board tick. And then you also get a better idea of how matchups work. And you'll be able to say, okay, well, maybe Lilia beats Ashe, generally speaking. Like, if your board is costing the exact same amount of gold, there is a rock, paper, scissors part of TFT where, like, if 2 boards are the exact same amount of gold, generally one will have a better win condition than the other into that matchup. Where, like, not necessarily always, but, like, Ashe will, like, beat or lose to, like, a Lee Sin type board or vice versa, whatever. And it's important to keep an eye on, like, what the matchups actually are. And, like, I think, for example, like Nara does really well into Ashe because she just can't out DPS like a Nara 3 before he stacks Titans and then just like clears the front line. And so that's one of those things where like if your board is costing him a gold, then Nara probably wins. So if you have a Nara player in your lobby and you want to play Ashe, maybe you don't. And this actually goes back to what you said about how to use this kind of information. that you've gleaned from these fights that you can say, okay, well, maybe if I know that there's a Gnar player in my lobby, I don't want to get super low HP because they will just kill me at that point. Potentially, right? If they're high rolling, then maybe that's when you play more aggressively in your mid game and you just don't play for the win out. We've talked a lot about playing for the win out, right? That you can't always play for the win out. And that's one of those kind of situations where if you have a bad win condition to a player who's also high rolling or high rolling more than you, then you can't always win out just because that's just how, it's a little rock, paper, scissors now and then. I think like assassins, they're not in the game right now, but are a great example of this where like sometimes you would just lose to assassin players if they were really strong because they would just beat you for, because you had like a four, you put like 4 sniper, 4 warden, but they're running like 6 units that jump to your back line. You can't really do much about that. So, as try as you might, maybe you outposition them, or maybe you're high roll enough or just play the game better than them to a degree where you beat them regardless. But generally speaking, that's a match that is negative, and two equal skill players playing the lines with like relatively equal luck, the assassin player will win. And so you need to be careful of how you manage your resources in a way where you're not going to just like, because like I complain just as much as everyone else about how matchmaking in TFT feels pretty bad sometimes. You play the one guy you don't want to play at the end of the game. But a lot of that can be mitigated by saying like, okay, I know I can't get first this game because this stupid Gnar guy is in the lobby, so I will bite the bullet. I'll play a stronger early mid game. And so when I play that Gnar guy, instead of being 10 HP, I'll be 20 HP, and then I'll go 4th instead of 5th. Because I'm not being, maybe I would have beaten those other people in the lobby, but I know that if I play that one guy, actually a great example of this in one of my games today. I hit Kaisa 3. I went to 1 HP, hit Kaisa 3, knowing that this other person in the lobby could very well hit Lilia 3. They did, and I went 5th because I played them the turn I hit, they hit, and then I lost to Lilia 3. And it was like, frustrating matchmaking for sure. But I was 1 life, and I knew it could happen. And like a similar thing, a bad matchup is a bad matchup. So yeah. It's tough, but that can help mitigate that matchmaking feels bad man moment that we all run into every now and then.